want to show you today our version, a small garden version of a Three Sisters garden, actually a Four Sisters garden, based on Buffalo Birdwoman's garden. You can see there's the fourth sister on top. Corn, beans, squash, and sunflowers. So first what? We have corn, beans, squash, and sunflowers. And then how? It's planted in mounds, and the mounds are probably about 2 feet around at the base. We mixed in cured compost in with our native soil. There's a lot of good stuff in our native soil too. And then it's probably about, her mounds were a little bit smaller. They're probably about 9 inches at the top. Ours are probably about 1 foot at the top. And they planted 7 or 8 kernels of corn on top. Then let me back up a second. So first, they planted sunflowers. The way they did it, as far as timing, they planted sunflowers on the north side of their garden. Kind of let me show you here. They had sunflowers at the north sides of their garden. And then each of these was a hill, just like I just showed you, of corn with beans in between and then squash in between those. So a nice, beautiful Four Sisters garden. So about 4 rows of these mounds by about, she said usually about 8 or 10 long, and then there'd be another set of squash. So ours is really kind of a small garden way to do that. She said they'd get their sunflowers in all the way back in, like, as soon as they could work the ground in April. They were in North Dakota, so adjust that based on where you live. We got ours in a little bit later, so they're not as tall as they would have been for her at the time. And then about 3 weeks later, they did their corn. And then about 3 weeks later, they did their squash. It started it. It took them that whole time to plant all of that. And then right after they got done with their squash, they did their beans. And their beans, I'll show you this on the way, and I'll show you squash. The beans they planted in between the corn in little mounds. She said like 7 by 14, but if you make any kind of little mound and put them in there, like they did like 3 beans on each side of this longer little mound in between. And you wait that long so that they have something to climb up once they go to climb. See, this one is starting to climb here. And if you pan back, this guy here is there. We were out here filming the other day and it was up to here. And now it's all the way up to the top here. And if you don't wait that long, they will go out past the top of your corn and topple over your corn. So you need to let your corn be established enough for the beans to take up, and then they'll vine up and then just explode in leaves. And as far as distance apart, she said 4 feet apart. I'm not sure if she meant 4 feet apart of like the outer edges of the mounds, or 4 feet apart of like center to center. We've always done center to center. She says if they had a name for it that meant like ears that touch, or leaves that touch each other. And she said if the leaves in between the mounds, if the corn from the 2 mounds touches each other, they won't have as big as stalks and they won't grow as big of ears. We've always grown plenty big, thick, strong stalks and plenty strong, big, thick, plump ears. So maybe we'll eventually move ours apart to more like 4 feet between the edges of the mounds, but right now we just do 4 feet center to center. So if you were to do this, you'd need about 8 feet in each direction. And you want a pattern of at least 4 so they can, like in a square, so that they can pollinate. And that's it's kind of a small garden minimum. And we do it this way so we can do in successions, which let me show you. So our way of doing it, we have 4 of these. Then we'll do some cucurbits. This year it happens to be melons. And the melons here, you can see there's some melons inside of here that are growing up, taking flight here. And we do have all of these radishes and nasturtiums as companions because they help keep some pests away, especially striped and spotted cucumber beetles, which spread a lot of disease that spreads wilts in the cucurbits. So all of our cucurbits have those on the mounds. Same mounds, that's 4 feet apart, same size of mounds. And that tradition has kind of stayed for squash. That's a very common way to plant squash, but it kind of got lost for a lot of people in corn. We used to do our corn in rows. We'd have these, 2 feet apart rows, and like rows that are 2 feet apart with like start them at every 6 inches, and then we'd thin them to like 1 foot apart. And we got plenty good production. It was great. So we tried this one year just because we grew plenty of corn. Jen was like, we grow too much corn actually. We can't eat all of this. We can't freeze all of this. So we tried this because we thought it was just kind of beautiful. And thinking it wouldn't be productive, and it turns out it's probably more productive than the other way. It's at least as productive and probably more productive. So this should have been a corn mound here. We just screwed up and actually had squash there. So these are like 3 and then 2. So we'll see how pollination goes here. And then these little beans are coming up. You can see that they were planted when the corn was about, I don't know, 8 inches to a foot tall. And they're beautiful coming up here, and they'll find their way over. And there's little mounds all over in between that will come up in between them. And we do it this way.
Planting each set of corn 3 or 4 weeks after each other?
So that we can have a succession. For the 2 of us, that's about as much corn as we can eat while it's fresh and freeze. And then we'll have corn for the rest of the summer. As soon as we start getting corn, we'll have corn all summer through all the way through September.
It's a wonderful way to constantly have corn.
Oh yeah, and then we have radishes also in any extra space in between the cucurbits. You can see here, like we have forage radishes that are planted as another companion in there.
And these cucurbits over on this side show you why you want to get your corn established before them, just like with the beans.
You want the corn to get established. Here's our last planting down here. And you want to do the beans and cucurbits. Talked about the beans, but also the cucurbits you want to do later, because they will come over and very easily. I've already trained this one aside a little bit, and it's grabbing onto some stuff here. So, but it'll still want to come over and just easily smother this. And so I'll have to keep training these aside. And you know, when you train these too many times, they don't like being handled a whole lot, and they tend to not do well after it. We've had also really good germination this year with, we'll just pre-soak. These aren't soaked at all, just showing you, generally usually put them on a paper towel and cover them over and put some water on it on a plate. And pre-soak them for a couple days. And we've had, out of 96 kernels that were planted, all but 2 germinated. And so that's like a 98% germination rate, 97.8. And after a couple days, you'll actually see little roots starting to make their way out, plant them up, and they'll be good to go. Something got into this one right here. I'm not sure what's going on there. So, what am I missing?
Do you want to say anything about how she would put them in her mouth to soak them?
No, that's okay, because we're doing this instead.
I think you got everything.
Well, let's head out, and we'll go back there. So that's mostly it. There's a lot in there. A way to do successions of corn, we probably put our next succession in 3 to 4 weeks after our first corn is planted. So we're having successions every 3-4 weeks. You see some companions. Not just companions, all of these, normally we wouldn't have our cucurbits this wide, we'd have just like 2 of them and then another set of corn, so they'll just vine under the corn. Companions, other companions with the cucurbits, these companions growing up, timing and production. It's a really beautiful, all of it's a really, really beautiful method, and it is super productive. Great way to do it in a small garden. Any 8x8 foot space, you can get 32 corn stalks in there that'll be super productive. And just thought maybe it's something some of you might want to do in your own gardens. So until next time, stay open to growing.